Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can see my smiling face. Welcome to another Bad Elf webinar. This is the 2020 Bad Elf webinar series on the Flex. This is our second webinar. We're going to be getting started here in just a few minutes. So please go ahead, sit back, get ready, grab your coffee, and we will be starting shortly. All right. So I know everybody's extremely busy these days, so we want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 9:02 in sunny Arizona this morning. If you were with us last week in the last webinar, I introduced myself. My name is Dr. Nick Smolowski. Great to see you again. I'm a director of GIS Solutions at Bad Elf. The moderator for today's session is Larry Fox. He is lurking in the background. He's our VP of Marketing and Business Development. You'll see in the chat today, if you want to go ahead and make sure you've got the chat window up, he's going to be looking for questions and aggregating them for a live Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions at any point during any of this webinar, please go ahead and type that question in as soon as possible. He will either respond right away and answer via text, or we'll try to respond at the live Q&A at the end. And if we do run out of time, we've decided today that we will stick around after the allotted 30 minutes for the webinar for a few extra, to stick around and answer any additional questions there may be. Again, this is super exciting for us. We really are excited for you to be here with us on another sunny, hot day, hopefully staying cool and safe inside and learning a little bit more about Bad Elf. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so in today's webinar, we've got a few goals and topics that we want to approach. And the major thing today is going to be the integration of the Flex and high accuracy GNSS data collection with using the Esri platform, specifically Collector for ArcGIS. And so today we're going to review the creation of editable feature classes and web apps / web maps in ArcGIS Online. So ArcGIS Online, you may hear me refer to that as AGOL throughout this webinar. Don't be confused. We're also going to be talking about connecting the Bad Elf Flex to your phone or tablet, establishing an RTK correction via N-trip. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means. We're literally going to be configuring Collector for ArcGIS. So I highly recommend at any point during this video, if you have questions, please type it in for Larry. He'll be moderating. Secondly, we are recording this video, and so we will be posting it on YouTube again. We're going to be going through things very quickly in an effort to get everything we can done in the short amount of time we have. What I recommend is when we post the video, if you need, go back and use the video and stop it along the way as I go through these different subjects to make sure that you can effectively get your Esri system connected with Bad Elf. Continuing, so we're going to be setting up Collector for ArcGIS. So we're specifically going to be talking about location provider, location profiles. We're going to be talking about GPS averaging and some different tips and tricks that we have found over the years for field data collection, and also have heard from our customers from around the globe. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to wrap up with a live Q&A. So logistically, what does that look like for us today? What that looks like is 30 minutes total runtime, 25 minutes for the presentation, 5 minutes for the moderated Q&A. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be sticking around to answer any further questions if need be. So today, unlike the last webinar, there's going to be a lot of live stuff going on. And so I'm going to ask you to please hang tight while we switch to and from live screens for your viewing pleasure. As you know, Murphy's Law likes to kick in when you do live demos. So hopefully today it's not going to be any issues there. So if you just bear with me for one moment. And hopefully you now see on your screen Google Chrome and ArcGIS.com up. So I'm hoping that most of you are familiar with this ArcGIS Online screen. This is where we're going to log in to AGOL. And so we're going to start at the very beginning of where you've got to be to get this all going. So let's do this. Okay, hopefully you see my ArcGIS Online screen there. There we go. And so I'm just going to click the sign in button here. And as I said, I'm going to be going very, very quickly to make sure that we can get the most amount of accomplished. And at a later date, if you need to look at the video, please do. Notice that I'm using my normal ArcGIS login. If you are an enterprise, say a government agency or a school organization, you may be using your enterprise login, or you've got one of these Facebook, Google, GitHub logins. For me today, I'm just going to use my standard login with Bad Elf. You may be familiar, this is your ArcGIS Online dashboard. And so what I'm going to do immediately to get this all going today is I'm going to go into the content screen to set up some data layers or features and a web map to collect data today. And so the first thing I'm going to do, because I'm very OCD, if you know me or have met me in the past, I'm going to create a folder. I want to store everything in a central location for ease of access. So today I'm going to call this webinar _2, making sure that in my naming conventions, I don't have any special characters or spaces other than underscores. And so now I have a new folder, and in this folder, I'm going to place all the objects, features, maps, things that we're going to utilize today to connect with the Flex and collect data for our webinar. So the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to click Create, and I'm going to create a feature layer. So it's very important to know that in Esri and the Collector ecosystem, when you're using a tablet, you have to have a feature layer that is editable. If you do not have a feature layer that's editable, your web map will not be an editable web map on your tablet or phone with your Flex. So this is an imperative step. Now you may be asking yourself, what if you use ArcGIS Desktop or ArcGIS Pro? No problem. You can absolutely create your feature classes locally on a desktop and then upload that to ArcGIS Online later. And there are some tips and tricks we have there. And in fact, we're going to be doing a subsequent video on how to connect and utilize ArcGIS Desktop versus ArcGIS Online. Today, we're going to focus on ArcGIS Online. Stay tuned on YouTube. You're going to see an additional video for the desktop software coming out soon. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to go down into Build a Layer. And for today's purposes, I'm going to select Points. And under the points, I'm going to click Create. Now, very key point here. See this Capture GPS Receiver Information checkbox? Let's make sure we always connect or click that. That's because we want the Flex to be storing metadata in some extra attribute columns inherently when we collect data. And so we're going to talk about this more. This is a really good way to make sure you always have authoritative data. We recommend it to everybody that we work with. So I'm going to click Next. I'm going to zoom into Arizona because that is where I am. You would do it to wherever your geography is. Click Next. And you're going to create a label. So this feature for me is just going to be called Webinar Test. You would want to name it something else intuitive, probably give it a summary. Remember, using only underscores as your special character. Otherwise, you like to truncate these names together. This is good GIS practice. Now, you click Done. I've seen this take anywhere between 30 and 60 seconds before. This is Esri making sure it's creating its feature layer for you on the cloud. I just recommend that you don't try to click through this. Just give it a second and be patient, and you'll see that it will pop up on your screen. Okay, so now I've created a feature class called Webinar Test. A few things I want to immediately point out and make sure that you're aware of is number one, under this layers area, there's some good things here, i.e. number one, export to. If you click that drop down, you'll notice that there are several ways you can export the data out. And if, say, you're a traditional surveyor, perhaps a CSV file is a good option, or you're, say, using drone software to post-process data. A CSV is great, or you're back into kind of a traditional GIS shapefile. Also, if you want to take pictures in the field and attach other documents to your feature, you need to make sure that you've got attachments enabled. If it says disabled, it actually means it's enabled. If I click this right now, it will turn off attachments. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure it is on. Another thing to be aware of is this share button on the right-hand side of your screen. If I click share here, and I want to make sure that I share it to the appropriate level, myself, my organization, or say to everyone in the public. For today's purposes, I'm going to say everyone in the public. Okay, so I've got my sharing set up. We've talked about some of the export and attachments. Another thing I want to point out quickly is on the top right, you've got a data tab. Notice we were in the overview tab. Now you're in the data tab. See here, this is the attribute columns. So this is the metadata or the attribute data that you're going to be collecting for your point feature class. Earlier, we turned on GNSS or GPS metadata. Notice that there are several columns that now collect data automatically from your PDOP, HDOP, VDOP, fixed type, altitude, longitude, latitude, vertical accuracy, horizontal accuracy, receiver name. These are great authoritative ways to keep fidelity of your data. This is also the location, if you wanted to, you could go to fields and you could create new fields, you know, so like if I wanted to have a name as a field and a string, I could do that here. It creates that as an additional attribute that's associated with that feature. Another area I want to point out very quickly, and remember on the video we post on YouTube, I highly recommend going back and pausing this as you're going through it, traversing through this webinar, so you can easily follow along. But we want to see the settings tab. Under the settings tab, there's a lot of important things we like to recommend. One, delete protection is always nice, i.e. you don't want people to be able to delete this layer accidentally. If you've ever been in that boat where maybe you were typing something and all of a sudden your computer crashed and you lost everything, you know why that's important. Under editing, we want to make sure enable editing is checked. I also recommend keep track of created and updated features. So this is going to be logging who is doing the data collection. If you're in an organization with lots of people in the field using lots of flexes or lots of GPS, this is a great way to kind of track on what's happening. And all of these features are worth taking a minute and looking at, okay? But for today, we want to make sure we have these 4 checks on. Enable editing, keep track of created updated features, keep track of who created and last updated features, and we want to enable sync for offline use. This is very important. Click Save. Okay, so we've set up all of the kind of what I would say the settings for our feature layer called webinar test. This is a points layer that we're going to use in a field with a flex to collect points. Okay, so we're almost there. We're halfway there. The next thing we need to do is put this new feature layer into an actual web map that we can access on the Flex or on the Collector app on our tablet or phone. So lots of ways to do this. If you're at all familiar with GIS or Geodesy, there's always 1,000 ways to do anything. And so maybe you go about doing this differently, like using the map button. For me, I like to click Open in Map Viewer. So I'm on the overview page of the webinar test, the feature class we just made. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say Open in Map Viewer. What that's going to do, it's going to create a temporary web map that's now placing our empty feature class, our data bin basically, called webinar test, into this blank map. Immediately, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the top middle of my screen and I'm going to click Save. Okay, so I'm going to save my map. Right now, it's all temporary. If I was to close my web browser, you will lose this and it will not work in the field. So I'm going to call this webinar 2 _ test. You may want to have something else there a little more intuitive. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've got a tag, and I'm going to put a description, test. I'm going to save it in the folder I created earlier, and I'm going to save the map. Mental note, I always recommend save, save, save. This program does not auto-save like you may be traditionally used to. So again, if you ever lost work in the past, like I have, and you have some, PTSD about that, always save, save, save. Okay, so we've got this feature now and this web map. We're almost there. Another thing I want to make mention is kind of special tip and trick we recommend to all of our partners is under webinar test, if you highlight and hover over it, there are these 3 dots. You can click the more options button, and in the configure pop-up, you are able to limit or filter what a user can click, change, and see when they're in the Collector app. And so if you click this configure attributes button, notice that you can display and have editable features on. We recommend only having a few of these things displayed. So if you click that and then uncheck everything, again, this is being displayed to the end user in the field. What we recommend is always have the display name of the receiver name. That's a good one to have. You could have horizontal accuracy if you want. Other than that, you want to turn on at the end those metadata fields, the editor, creator, things like that. This is going to be essentially up to you. However, you don't always want people to be able to edit these columns after they populate automatically, and we don't necessarily want everybody to be able to see them. So you can click OK, and you've set up some of the pop-ups for your map. Now, we made a change here. We need to save it. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Otherwise, it's not going to be saved. You can also change the attribute style, so the symbology if you want by, like I did here, click this little change style button. But for today, we're just going to leave it as is. So we are now ready to jump to our tablet and to the Flex. And so we have set up a feature class that is editable. We've done a couple little tweaks to it to make it a little more functional. And then we set up and saved a web map that now we can load in Arc Collector. So bear with me for a minute. I'm going to jump from my computer screen to my tablet. So I've got an iPad here, nothing too special, nothing top of the line, just a average average iPad. So let's see here. Let me get this shared. All right, so you should now see my iPad screen, and you can see my settings screen up. So the first thing we always want to do is we need to make sure that we are connected to the Flex. And so go into your settings screens under Bluetooth, and I've got a bunch of Flexes here, but I know that the serial number for my Flex is 144718, and you can see it's connected. You may be asking yourself, hey, Nick, how are you doing this inside of the building? We have a special setup where we actually have an antenna on the roof. It's a long story. We don't recommend doing this type of setup inside. You're going to want to actually start your Flex up outside, have a clear view of the sky. It needs to be able to see GPS satellites, right? But today, we actually have an antenna on the roof, and we are connected through that. So I've got my Bluetooth connected to the Flex. The next thing I need to do is I need to open up the actual Flex app. So I'm going to open up the Flex app. And because I've already Bluetooth connected with my Flex, it immediately connects to that same Flex, and you can see on my screen that 144718 serial number. Now, I have already unlocked my Flex into its extreme mode. There is a standard mode Flex and an extreme mode Flex. And that's going to be whether you want 30 to 60 centimeters of accuracy horizontally or up to about a centimeter horizontally, depending on what settings. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I recommend go to our YouTube channel, check out the first webinar video. We go into detail on the different levels of the standard Flex and the extreme unlocked Flex. You can see on my screen under accuracy mode, I'm currently in extreme settings. So I'm actually in that higher tier of the Flex. Now, at the bottom, you'll notice that it says N-Trip. And so as of right now, I am not connected to any RTK network. So I'm going to click the N-Trip button here. And I've already set up a N-Trip client with our local RTK network here provided by graciously by AZ Cores and ADOT. This is a free account here in the state of Arizona. Depending on where you live in the world, your country, state, providence, you may get free services. So as this is connecting here, we're just going to give it a second. And I'm looking at the status screen right now. We are live, and so I see data flowing. I did turn this on before the webinar today, and it looked like it worked just fine. Now it's having a little bit of a hiccup. So right now I've got VRS set up. This is not something I was planning on looking into here on this webinar, but I'm going to show you very quickly. I'm actually going to try a different core station. If you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, just hang tight. This is another webinar we've got planned. So let's see if, there we go. So the actual mount point provided by AZ Cores was giving a hiccup for the VRS setting. I switched to a local Cores network here, Scottsdale, where we're located. You can see under my GPS fix on my screen there, it's now saying RTK fixed, and I'm down to 0.2 inches. So a fraction of an inch horizontal accuracy. That's really, really good accuracy. And so we've now, in the back end, set up our feature class in ArcGIS Online. We set up our web map in ArcGIS Online. We've now connected to the Flex. We've got our RTK flowing. Last but not least, it's time to actually fire up Collector. So in Collector, before we jump into any web map, and if I did my job correctly, you'll notice that at the bottom it says Webinar Test 2. And so that web map I created actually is there for us to utilize. But wait, we've got a couple more things to do to get you across the finishing line to collect data. So I'm going to go to my profile settings here, and immediately I'm going to scroll down to where it says Location right in the middle. And I'm going to make sure that the provider is set up for the Bad Elf. And so I already have this pre-set up. Normally what happens is you've got it set on integrated. That's the GPS inside of your tablet. And what you would need to do is click the add button. And once you're Bluetooth connected, you'll see your Bluetooth Flex number there, or your serial number there. You would select it. You're going to click the check mark, and that's key. So you're going to have to add the actual location provider. That's going to be the Flex. And then you set the antenna height, which we can get into a later date, but on a fixed height pole, a 2-meter pole, the Flex phase center, it's going to be 2.23 meters. And then you need to have that check mark on. So once I've got the check mark next to the Bad Elf, I can go back to my profile settings. And now I can literally go down under location. We just set up the provider. Now let's set up profile. So I've already also got this set up. And just to show you, because we're running short on time, I'm not going to reset it up. But know that this is what you need to have in Collector for all of the data to jive correctly. So we want apples to apples, oranges to oranges. And so for your GNSS coordinate system, i.e. the coordinate system being projected by the RTK network, which here in Arizona is AZ Cores, is going to be GCS NAD 1983-2011. And that FIPS ID or code is 6318. The map coordinate system, so the aerial image in the background of the map, or the topo. So Collector's doing some transformations on the fly. The map coordinate system is WGS 1984 Web Mercator Auxiliary Sphere, or 3857. And you need to have that data transformation set up, and you can see that WGS 1984, which is ITRF08, to NAD 1983-2011. So if this is all jargon and you have no idea what we're talking about, perfect. Our next webinar series is going to be me whiteboarding a whole bunch of stuff about GPS, GNSS, coordinates, projections. We're going to have a good old style lesson in like a schoolhouse, and we're going to teach you all about why these settings are imperative. So make sure you set up your location profile, you can name it survey or flex extreme. There would be, and note, this is important, there are different location profiles for the type of flex that you're using. So standard, or for the extreme flex, or say if you're using another bad-off product like the GNSS Surveyor, be aware that there would be different profiles for different devices. So we've got that set up. Last but not least, I'm just going to talk about two quick things. One, under the collection settings, you see accuracy. I set that at 3 feet. So the system is not going to collect a point unless it's better than 3 feet. Reason I did that is the flex is a sub-meter unit. That seemed like a good idea. I never want to have anything worse than a meter. So that's a good cutoff point. The second thing is you can see GPS averaging. I have that off. That's an option if you want to take multiple points at a single location. Just note, we only recommend doing that for points. Do not try to average features for your lines, polylines. So I've got this all set up. I click done. Last but not least, I'm going to click the web map called webinar 2_test. And if I did my job correctly, you now see the exact location with a GPS accuracy of 0.2 inches in the Scottsdale Park where I'm located near Larry. You can see that I've got the layers, and if I want, I can click and add a point, and I can take the point and I can submit it. And I have successfully now set up AGOL, set up collector, set up my flex, and collected a point in survey grade accuracy. Okay, so we're running real tight on time, and so I am going to start sharing my actual screen again here. So just bear with me. Okay, so hopefully you see this switching to live demo screen. We don't have a lot of time, but I just want to say a couple things here. Always remember that you need to create an editable feature class, and you need to have that editable feature class in your web map for it to work with Collector and ArcGIS Online, Survey 1, 2, 3, and the other Esri ecosystem products. Always want to make sure that you connect your bad-elf flex via Bluetooth to your phone or tablet, whether it's iOS, Android, or Windows. And if you need to use RTK corrections, always remember that you will either have to burn a daily token or have an unlocked extreme flex, and you will need to set up your N-trip settings for your specific RTK network. You always want to remember to configure Collector for ArcGIS, and so the location provider and the location profile, GPS averaging, and your maximum GPS accuracy settings. Always want to make sure you have those set up correctly for the type of flex you're using, whether that's standard or extreme. Quickly, tips and tricks. Always turn on the bad-elf flex outside. It likes to be not enclosed. It wants to see all the satellites clearly in the sky. Always recommend turning off attributes of GNSS metadata from web map pop-ups. This will eliminate users being confused and seeing too much and having too much power to edit. Always remember to click the bad-elf provider or to click the bad-elf provider after creating it. It's a little wonky. It looks like you, after creating a location provider, it's actually selected wrong. You actually need to click it and have a check mark next to it. Always use averaging for only points. Don't use it for any other types of capture. Always change monitor accuracy thresholds, i.e. that's what the worst level of accuracy is. So that's a good way to make sure you are always connected to your flex. Sometimes if it disconnects, maybe because your iPad goes to sleep mode and your Bluetooth disconnects, you want to make sure when you're collecting the data, you're collecting it correctly with the flex, not the integrated receiver in your tablet. Always, always, always be aware of your environment when collecting field data. Safety first, everybody. OSHA first, right? We need to be safe. Wear safety vests. Look up. Don't walk around with your head in the tablet. Last but not least, there is an all-new Esri app called ArcGIS Field Maps that will operate with the exact same functionality that you learned about today. So if you've heard about the release, from Shaner, one of the reps at Esri. You can see the link down at the bottom there, but I implore you to check out ArcGIS Field Maps. It's a really neat new software that combines all of the different collector and tracker and survey 1, 2, 3 all into a single system, and everything we went over today will work exactly the same. I have shared this in the past, but if you want, look for this story map. We have created a story map, and I can show you quickly that goes through in grueling detail the exact setup on how you need to do all of the things with ArcGIS Online, all the way to data collection. And so if you want a static or a story map way to look through that, this is a great way. So definitely recommend taking a look at that. And we are actually a little over, and so hopefully you've stuck with us here. So we're going to jump into a live question and answer. If you already need to run, I totally understand. Larry, are you out there?
I am, and Nick, we have a lot of questions. Thank you so much for a great presentation. The first question that came in is, what about working with Portal?
What about working with Portal? That's a good question. So Portal, the Flex should be totally interoperable with Portal, certainly as Esri moves forward with this new push. I do recommend, because Portal is pretty detailed and set up, and you need to have a enterprise account. You know, you probably have a DBA on staff or in your organization. I would actually recommend reaching out to your Esri support or your account manager at Esri. We can certainly help facilitate that, but it should not be an issue with Portal moving forward.
All right, the next question is, if I don't have a local RTK service, if I use your tokens, how would I get corrective service with world coverage?
That's a great question. So I definitely recommend, if you did not watch the first webinar, we discussed one of the options we have with the Extreme Flex is called L-band. So when you burn a token, baked into the price of the token is L-band satellite correction service and RTK. Today we discussed RTK via N-trip, but the reality is we could have engaged L-band, and L-band is a set of a few extra satellites that are separate and disparate of GPS, GLONASS, BIDO, Galileo. This is a correction set of satellites, and so once you get that initial lock with L-band, we're looking at about 5 to 10 centimeters in most places of the world until you get into the very northern and southern parts of the hemisphere, north-south pole. But yes, there is an option. You can be offline, out in the sticks, in the bush, and not be on the grid, so to speak, and you could use L-band for satellite corrections and get down to that 5 to 10 centimeter range. Otherwise, you would need to do RTK corrections. There's something else to mention, that if you are really out in the middle of nowhere and you don't want to use L-band, we do a standalone collection as well. So you could use the Flex, you could set it up to a rapid static or a static collection, averaging those points, and post-correct it with a service like Opus, supplied from NOAA and the NGS. And so you could also do a post-correction workflow. If that's something you're interested in or want to talk more about, I highly recommend reach out to Larry or I, or sales@bad-elf.com. We can certainly talk through those options a little bit more as well. That's a great question.
All right, we have another question. We have a feature service that's currently set up for the GNSS metadata capture. To use the same feature for collection with Bad Elf, will the metadata capture conflict and require a different feature service for field capture?
That's a good question. As long as it's enabled, it shouldn't have an issue. Where you may run into an issue is if you set up your location provider and profile for a, let's say, the 1 meter GNSS surveyor unit we have. That's going to be set up to WGS 84 inherently, where if you're using the Flex and RTK mode, it's probably going to be in that GCS NAD 1983. And so you could have some projection confliction errors in the projection systems based on what system you're connected to. However, the GPS or GNSS metadata field that you've turned on, I do not believe that it should have an issue going from one provider to another. So effectively, if you had two different GPS and they were both using the same services, you could set up the same effective settings almost across the board, and it should work with no issue.
All right, Nick, we have one last question. Can all setup and collection be performed on an iPad Pro?
Larry, you're a little bit better and more versed on the different iPad versions. I believe it should be no issue, right? If an iPad has Bluetooth connection, you should be good to go.
And I guess
Larry,
I would add to that, Nick, in general, most of the newer versions of iPads, iPhones, Android phones, Android tablets are all compatible. So generally, it's not an issue. You just really want to be pretty much up to date on a recent version of iOS.
Great. Okay, so just to be cognizant of everybody's time, we're going to end the official webinar now. And so I'm going to thank you for attending. If you have any other questions, please go ahead and stick on the webinar. We're going to spend another couple minutes going through any additional questions you may have. But really want to just say thank you for attending. It's always a blessing to see you guys. It's a blessing to hear from you, the calls and the emails. It's inspiring getting to see how you're using Bad Elf to go out and change the world. It's really awesome. And you know, keep it up, everybody. We're going to be here for you like we've always been. And we're really excited about these webinars. And so please make sure that you pay attention to our social media posts and channels for our next webinar coming up. If you had to drop out of this early or were not able to attend the first webinar, stay tuned on our YouTube channel. We'll be posting it there as well. And as I mentioned before, if you have any personalized questions or additional information that you want to know or need, please reach us at sales@bad-elf.com. Really appreciate everybody. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and officially end now. Stick around if you want to answer a couple more questions or have any further questions. So thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon. Stay safe out there. Cheers.
Nick, we do have one request, which is to post the link to configuring Esri Collector for a high accuracy data collection.
I can do that. Yep. I will post. All right. So, Larry, we've officially ended the webinar here. What other questions may we have or might we have?
We do have a question on Android OS compatible, and the answer is yes.
Those are the best questions.
One other thing, on the Bad Elf website, there's a GIS resources section where there's a number of articles on how to configure all of the Esri apps. So that includes Esri Collector, what will be the new field maps, Survey 123, Quick Capture. So the story map is there. We have some sample data as well. So there's a number of help articles that we already have made available to you.
Larry, I'm just quickly showing this is our Esri page where we talk about Collector for ArcGIS, Quick Capture, Survey 123, just to echo what you were saying. And the other option he mentioned was under this GIS resources tab, where we have a ton of options getting started, collecting data. Highly recommend taking a look at these different resources as well.
So we're going to do one last question. I heard that when you connected the Flex to your device, on the other apps can have high accuracy as well. How does that work?
Yeah, great question. So in most normal circumstances, when you connect the Flex to your tablet or phone, And for lack of a better description, it hijacks that GPS position from the integrated GPS provider inside the tablet or phone, and it supersedes it with the position from the Flex. So once you are Bluetooth connected, for an example, on your iOS device, that high accuracy position propagates through all the apps. So quite frankly, if you open up, Uber, the Uber app should be showing a higher accuracy, or Google Maps, for an example. Now, one caveat to that is, if you are using an Android device, you may need to work through something called mock locations. We do have some user resources on setting up mock locations depending on which tablet and Android platform you're using. But yes, to answer your question, once you're connected and Bluetooth paired with your device, that device should inherently be utilizing the high accuracy position from the Flex.
All right, Nick. I think that concludes our call for today. If we didn't get to your questions, I will personally be answering all the questions and putting that in a written form, and we will email that within a day or two. If your question is slightly more urgent, absolutely reach out to me or Nick. You can get to us pretty easily through sales@badelf.com. So Nick, back to you to close.
All right, so this is the unofficial close before I get, the hanger. Just want to say thanks again, everybody. And it truly is a pleasure working with you all. And it is inspiring. It's what makes our days at Bad Elf really, really easy to see how you guys are changing the world with these amazing devices. So if you have any questions, love to hear from you. If not, keep an eye out on our social media pages for the next webinar and YouTube for a posting of this video. See you guys. We love you. Talk to you soon.